I think we're up. We're waiting for Facebook to join us. Facebook hasn't come in yet. Hey, this is Redeeming Life Live if you're joining us on YouTube. If you're coming in just now on Facebook, welcome. We are doing Redeeming Life Live. I'm going to mess with a couple settings here and make sure everything's coming in well. Let's take a look at how we're doing. Great. I think we're looking at... Here we go. There's us. Hey, say hi, Derek.
Hi.
Hey, this is Pastor Derek with me. We're getting rolling on this thing, and we're going to do Redeeming Life Live this morning. I know there's a lot going on. We're going to be at the Rose Park Festival in just a little bit.
Yep.
So we're rolling. We have, I guess there's a royal wedding we're competing with right now. I mean, I don't know, there's all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah.
We have a lot of questions, and so we're just going to jump in. Derek, you want to read through those questions? I'm going to see if I can...
Yep. Just all of them?
Yeah, let's just, this is what, oh, by the way, so we have a cell phone here. Here's how you can engage with us. We have this phone. It is just a anonymous phone, basically. We don't have any numbers in here or anything like that. 385-368-6665 is the number. And I don't know if that's on. I'm going to see if I can see a computer over here. I'm going to switch over here to... see if I can see the live stream on Facebook. I'm not sure if I can. Anyway, the point is this. You can connect with us on Facebook. You can text in. All these questions were actually texted in over the last couple of weeks to 385-368-6665. We've written them down, and that's what we're going to deal with to the best of our ability here. But you can still join the conversation by texting in or jumping in on the comments if I can see them. I think I'm going here. And I'll get that sorted out while you read the questions. And so why don't you go ahead and roll through what we've got.
Alrighty, first question. Is it biblical to have female deacons or elders? So that's question one. And then we've got one here that says, Canada has a no gender birth certificate option. What does the Bible say about that? Next, I think this one's kind of a question. It says, Utah is an LDS state. If you don't like that, why don't you move?
Yeah, I don't think that came in quite as a question.
But we're going to treat it like
we'll deal with it as a question.
What can or should churches do to attract the younger generation that doesn't really care about church anymore? All right. And let's see. When are Christians going to take up the social justice of school shootings and do something?
That seems like a loaded question.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see, there's no tithing in the New Testament. That's the claim here. And so why do churches always want your money? So those are the questions we've got. If you've got more, text them in, and we'll try to get to them if we can get through these ones. But
we have a lot here. Now, I'll just give a little tech update. So I'm messing around with the Mevo thing still. It's still a work in progress. I put it in autopilot.
Yeah.
I can't change that, so every once in a while it goes over to you and me, and I'll try to keep an eye on it.
It'll be okay.
So it doesn't know who's doing what. So what do we want to tackle first?
Well, we just do them in order, I guess. Is it biblical to have a female deacon or female elder?
Oh man, we got all kinds of... I'm hoping, if you're watching this, let us know. And every once in a while I'm seeing some glitchy stuff. So I think Pastor Brett's in on the other end. Pastor Brett, if you're watching, text us and let us know if this is coming in okay. I might need to turn this off. That might be part of something's giving us some grief. But
it's all good.
If you're having grief on your end, let us know. Okay, is it biblical to have female deacons or elders? This is a tricky question. Partly because it's loaded by what we want.
Right.
You know, what we might want is an inclusive situation for men and women, which is not a bad thing.
Well, this may not have always been as tricky as it is right now. So right now we're dealing with, like some of the other questions, social justice and stuff like that. We're right in the middle of several big movements in our country right now with equality and maybe even kind of throw in feminism in there, and there's some other stuff happening, and so that's just kind of on the radar, and it's around this question because we're dealing with what can a man do biblically and what can a woman do biblically, and is it okay for some of these roles to cross, or that's why I think there's sensitivity to it that maybe has not always existed at every point in time, all the time.
I think you raise a good point, though. I think we need to say this up front. There is a biblical precedent that men are equal in value
Amen.
with women. Women and men are equal in value. And so we say at Redeeming Life, maybe different in a little bit of purpose, different in a little bit of role, but absolutely and completely equal in value. And half the time I feel like I value the women in our church, including my wife especially, more because they're very hardworking, very compassionate, very caring. And in churches, you tend to see more women serving in church than men.
Right.
You know, so this isn't at all to say that women have less value. Very controversial, though. Here's where I think we should go. Let's start with what launches us into eldership and deacon offices. So let's go to 1 Timothy 3. This Mevo keeps looking at you a lot. It loves you.
It likes me.
It loves you. That's what it is. We're still working on it. I appreciate the patience as we work through that. I'm still going. Are you there? You're there.
Yeah.
I need to speed up here. Okay. So here's what we have in 1 Timothy 3. We have qualifications for the office of an overseer, which is usually an elder, and an office of deacon, which is really a servant. Also, I think it's very valuable to see, going back to Acts, I believe it's chapter 7, but I'm going to verify that real fast. Acts chapter 6. In Acts chapter 6, there was a problem. In that problem, there was actually a racial issue going on among the Christians, the Hellenists and the Greek, the Jewish, the Hebrew and the Hellenist women or widows were not being given bread in correct proportions. So that it says, look, the 12 summoned the full number of disciples, and they said, it is not right that we should give up preaching the word of God to serve tables. Therefore, brothers, pick out among you 7 men of good repute, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, who we will appoint to this duty. But we will devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word. And then they said, please them. So they have here's these people, these guys that they picked. And then verse 7 says, and the word of God continued to increase, and the number of disciples multiplied greatly in Jerusalem, and the great many of priests became obedient to the faith. So what was happening here was this problem where something was wrong. They needed some people to fix the problem. There was already a distribution. So it wasn't that they couldn't distribute bread without these guys. What they wanted was men that were godly, of good character, to fix the racial problem. Now maybe that meant they went and actually served themselves. Maybe they went and taught others. We don't really know. And we don't see that as a clear picture of the deacon being established. What we do see, though, is later an obvious establishment of an office to this. So maybe that worked so well, God said, hey, let's continue to have Christ-like, faithful servant leaders doing this role. So we have this responsibility for elders and a responsibility for deacons. But I would like to point out this. I think this is where we sometimes miss some things when we run in our desire opposed to running in our biblical precedents. If you have that open there too. So if you look up to the qualifications of an overseer, skim through there and find things that talk about men.
So in verse 2, you've got that you're a husband of one wife. So that kind of seems to be very one direction.
Kind of dictates that in a male gender direction.
Yeah.
And then there's some male tone in this as you go through it. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders. There's a language about his family. And then you see the same thing when you move down to the situation with the deacons. Verse 12, let deacons each be the husband of one wife, managing their children and their own household well. So you have the same exact language. So if you're going to say an elder has to be a male, but a deacon doesn't, you now have a problem.
Well, because you're using the same logic from the first paragraph into the second paragraph,
Yeah, you have an inconsistency problem, and it's the same. I mean, you're going to be in trouble there. So we see that all the time. Oh, pastors can only be men, but deacons can be women or whatever. Okay, that's part of what's going on here. So at least at Redeeming Life, we said we want to be consistent to this. And then people say, well, why males only? Well, I go back to Genesis. Mm-hmm. I like this idea that the church, from what I read in the Bible, looks like the family. The role in the family has this idea that the buck stops with the man. Now, that in Genesis, that does not mean the man makes all the decisions. In Genesis 3, that means the man Adam took all of the responsibility for the sin that they had committed, although Eve initiated that with the serpent. Unless you say the role was that the man was supposed to protect his wife and his family unit, and he dropped the ball, and that was where the sin really came in. The point is, Adam takes the brunt of that.
Right.
We move forward to things like Ephesians 5 in the household, where you see that the man is supposed to be responsible for leading, guiding, training his home. And in our society, we go, oh, that means he calls the shots and he gets to be the domineering. And it's not that at all. He used to die for his family, love his family like Christ loved, love his wife like Christ loves the church. There's supposed to be a super Christian-driven servanthood put on the man. And interestingly, the man is called to love his wife, but the wife is only called to like her husband. There's not a mutual, you have to love each other in Ephesians 5 there. The point of all this, the reason I share all this is because if the church is a family unit like this, and this is God's intention for the family unit, then we want to follow that. And then you take that forward to where people complain, people get rough, people get hard, and I don't really want to be the kind of pastor that says, let's go ahead and just throw our women to that, have a good time. But then someone says, what about the deaconess in Romans 16:1? What do we do with it? I don't even know how the ESV translates that. I don't know.
Let's look at it.
I don't know if we have any comments coming in on Facebook.
On Facebook.
Nobody's like, this pastor's insane. And then I'll explain how we handle this at Redeeming Life. And I'm not going to tell any other church how to do this, but I will explain how we do this. So Romans 16:1, and ESV actually makes a translation with a footnote. It says, I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a servant of the church at Caesarea, that you may welcome her in the Lord in a way that's worthy of the saints. Well, some of the translations we have the word, the word is the deacon word, but that's a servant word. We see that word used repeatedly in the role of a servant. Context dictates what that is.
Yeah.
The ESV is determined that servant would be the case, and then they have a little note that says, or deaconess. But there's a big difference between a servant, deacon, and an office of deacon, that responsibility of deacon. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any pushback? Any thoughts on that?
No, I agree with you.
Our church, so we're pretty much
this is the text that a lot of people will jump to, and I've been a part of different organizations and stuff that have said, yes, this is our justification for having female deacons. But I think what you've pointed out, it didn't take into account the translation of the word, because the word servant or deacon, diakonos, it could be that you use it in a very generalized kind of a term of saying, hey, look, you're serving, you're doing this, you're helping.
In Acts 7, you're a waiter.
Yeah, you're a waiter.
But
it doesn't necessarily mean or bring over with it the full ramifications of this is an office too.
Yeah.
Like you can have men shepherding their family. That term doesn't necessarily mean you're a pastor.
Right.
Because the same terms are being used for when you're a shepherd or when you're.
We could even say pastor of your home. That doesn't mean lead pastor of a church.
Exactly. So I think that's probably where maybe some of these churches that have said, yes, we're going to go ahead and have female deacons. Well, we're not out marching to get them to stop, whatever. No. But we would lovingly say, I think that this text, you maybe have missed a kind of a nuance maybe in the translation that this didn't necessarily indicate office.
But now hear this. So we have a deacon team at Redeeming Life, and we follow So when you look at Romans 16:1, you have to say, well, what does the entirety of the Bible say? Well, we have these other things we have to figure out if we've got this right, letting Scripture interpret Scripture. So if that's the office of deacon, how do we put that together with 1 Timothy 3? So we've said, okay, at Redeeming Life, we have male elders, and right now I'm the only elder plus our borrowed elders from Risen Life Church, and then we have a team, and the men are holding this office of deacon. Women are on our servant team, our deacon team.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually have roles where we have these liaison roles where they work with different ministries and they do different things. But collectively as a team,
right.
They all are providing feedback and input. And frankly, our women serve really well,
mm-hmm.
extremely well. And they are compassionate and caring. And it's a really valuable thing to have them. They give us new perspective in some of this. However, if something were to go crazy,
mm-hmm.
like we see in Acts chapter 6, we got to fix a major problem. We have a racial tension issue. The buck should stop with the men on the team, and the women get to come along without having to face the brunt of that sort of overwhelming responsibility, but they get to serve in a good way. And when I say get to, I don't mean like, oh, well, we're going to allow them. No, I mean, that's the blessing and benefit
mm-hmm.
without
the burden of the responsibility that was placed on Adam. I mean, so this question helps lead into the next question.
Yeah, what's the next question? What do we got? I'm letting you run the cards today.
You're good. In Canada.
Oh, no. Who sent this one, by the way? No, I love Canada. I kind of, there are times I'm like, man, Canada looks like a great place. They're pretty chill. Looks cold, but they're pretty chill most of the time, right? But
they don't have freedom of speech there. So
they have a lot of different issues. But
we've got some different
I had to Google this. Go ahead and read the question.
So
I didn't even know anything about
this. The question is, in Canada, they now have a no gender option for birth certificate on their birth certificate, meaning when the baby's born, the doctor pulls the baby out.
I don't know how this works.
It's we don't know. I guess we'll leave it up to the baby or something. I don't know. And you can check no gender. And of course, this is a big thing right now. So there's a lot happening.
Is gender on the birth certificate? Because I learned in public university that there is a difference between sex and gender. Sex being physical, biological parts.
Okay.
Gender being that which is in you that leads you in matching up with those physical.
Well, so
that's
been a big argument, right? It's still a big argument on college campuses right now. That's the big differentiation between the two, that you have a subjective feeling of what you are, and that's your gender, and then there's your biological sex. And the problem is historically we've always interchanged those two, and they've mm-hmm. been just fine saying that your gender was what was compatible with what your sex was. It's been divided.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing, though.
At least trying to.
It seems like it would be simple on a birth certificate to say sex of the child is blank.
Yeah.
Because like you just said, the baby is born.
Yep.
When has any doctor ever gone, we have no idea what the sex of this child is, unless there's two parts, some kind of drastic physical problem.
Well, so here's the issue with it, though. If you go ahead and which one is going to take precedence? Is it going to be the sex that when you say, well, what are you?
Oh, people are arguing that leads you into something.
Yeah, well, if you want to say that what your subjective sense is, or if you define gender as what I feel like I am internally, and then you identify that as such, putting it out there as if that's your sex, you now run into some issues. So specifically in a hospital with a baby, I don't know how many people have had boys, but if you have a boy, there tends to be a procedure that a lot of boys get right after birth.
Yeah.
And if you're identifying that child as a female, but it's not a female, or if you identify the child as a male and it's not a male, and then they go in to get a certain procedure, like I think you told me a story or something.
Yeah, we're not going to put that on tape.
Story.
I would die. Someone would kill me.
Yeah, probably would.
It's a great story, though.
Point being, like there are ramifications to gender, and so the question here.
Let me really quickly, for the sake of
so
I didn't know anything about this, and I appreciate the question coming in. I had to Google it. I had no idea what they were talking about, so I started Googling, and I found two things I just want to share real quick. This is from NBC News. May 9th was when this article was that talks about this individual Ferguson. The name here is Joshua M. Ferguson. However, he refers to him or herself as they, them, we, because he or she says that he is a non-binary person, which is really confusing with language, especially since they and we are plural. So he or she, Joshua was the name, so I'm going to go with he. He is now saying he's two or more people, which is creepy, opposed to a person with a particular sort of male or female gender. So he's convoluting this very much so. Anyway, he's this one who's had his birth certificate reissued and is legally championing for non-binary people in Canada. I thought that was really fascinating until I found this article, which comes from acj.com, and there's a few other sources, but this one was pretty succinct, that said they passed the law, SB 179, in California in October. This article came from 2017. It was on October 18th. In the Los Angeles Times, it says, starting in 2019, non-binary options will be allowed for birth certificates and driver's licenses in California. Mm. So this is not just exclusive to Canada.
No, it's not.
So let's get to the issue. What is the heart? I mean, what do you do with this? I think we're done with this question. I'm gonna over here.
Oh gosh, there's so many directions you could go. So the question. So let's be fair to the question. What does the Bible say about it? Because there are about 1 billion different directions we can run with, and so the Bible, Genesis 1:27, says that God, when He created man, He created them male and female. In His image, He created them male and female. So I don't know if it's worth saying, but probably it's like God is not male and He's not female, but He in who He is creates out of an overflow of who He is, and there comes male and female. So in a sense, like there's.
But you see male.
We do see male language.
Incomplete. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. He goes on in chapter 2, and he says that it is not good for man to be alone. God saw that.
Yeah.
So man was not self-sufficient in and of himself as a sex or gender. He needed. There needed to be something more, and even Adam knew that. Like, so the moment that Eve is made out of the rib of Adam wakes back up from this slumber and writes the first poem in the Bible of, wow, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. You're amazing.
Check out this lady.
Check this out. And I'm not gonna keep going there.
No, let's stop.
So yeah, clearly Adam even recognized that. So what does the Bible say about it? I think especially coming out of that last question.
Which really quickly, I know there are people going, wait a minute, he just said there's no gender. God's referred to as a father, not a mother. That is true, and I think that's language that speaks into that role for our understanding, but also relationship, all sorts of things. But God is not incomplete. Right. God has the entirety of that. So when women say, "Oh, I can't relate to a father," well, you can, because a friend of mine, Jared Jenkins, talks about like the Proverbs 31 woman being a beautiful display also of God.
Yeah.
Right. It's not. Anyway,
there were 16th century theologians that said the exact same thing about some of these passages. Like, wow, look at the motherhood of God in that sense too.
Yeah.
Like, and so
I just want to
so much stuff.
kind of qualify that statement before people freak out. So okay.
Well, so like the last question, dealing with roles and the roles of men versus women, which I think help lead into this. Like when God creates us male and female, even sex and gender, and I'm just going to refer to it as gender because I'm going to say that they're one thing.
Yeah, it's so convoluted.
Yeah. When God creates male and female, in the creation of genders, you have something that's not supposed to be about us. Again, we always flip the camera around and say, look, the world's about us. This is about me and my feelings or my gender or my this or my that or whatever, my role. When ultimately, I think the gender roles were created as a way to exemplify who God is, glorify who God is, and really it's about Him, and to display the role that He has with us. But it's not just about us, if that makes sense.
It does. So our whole purpose in where He's placed us, how He's created us, what our role is, what our gender is, where we live, all of it. Mm-hmm. Difficulties we might be born with even, difficulties we might come into later, are to glorify God. Mm-hmm. All of it. Right? Our purpose is to glorify Him. And so when we miss that point, suddenly we're trying to glorify ourselves.
Well, and I wonder where the root of a lot of this is coming from with this fight against, I mean, it's a vicious fight against gender that we're having right now. Because people...
I think there's a few things.
Well, I jumped to Romans just in thinking about this question.
Before you go there, let me go to the Old Testament. This is not new.
No, not at all.
Not at all. If you go to Judges, the theme of Judges, you see over and over and over and over again, and they were doing what was right in their own eyes. Mm-hmm. not God's eyes. And the judge, who, not like gavel judge, but hero, fixing things, bringing back to order, bringing things back to God, would always be called of by God to bring the people back to God.
Right.
And then they would go, oh, yay, everything's good again. And then the spiral would keep going down again as soon as they wanted to do what was right in their own eyes. I think what's happening, and then I know where you're going to go. I think I know where you're going to go in Romans. I think what happens is you get this little whisper from Satan that says, hey, you should do what's right in your own eyes. And what's right in your own eyes? What does your flesh want to do? You should do that. And then Romans 1 talks about what the flesh wants to do. You want to try. I mean, this is not a mystery for most Christians. We've seen this.
Yep. So the text that I immediately popped up, in my head was Romans 1, and I want to say it's verse 23. So he's dealing with non-believers and really just sinners, right? And how would we suppress the truth of God?
Which is all
in
of us.
unrighteousness.
Which is all believers, non-believers. Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, like, why is there this big fight against gender? What's the issue with saying, okay, there's male and there's female, and they're different. They're equal in value, but they're different in role, and you have capabilities that I don't have, and maybe a man has capabilities that a woman doesn't have, and I mean, it's a legitimate thing right now. Like, if you've paid any attention to any social media or any news outlet, like, this is a thing. I was driving home from work, and on a billboard right there off the freeway, it's this giant picture, and I'm guessing, assume it was a female, and had long blonde hair, in some overalls, carrying welding equipment, and the big caption on it was, "I can do anything a man can do." And I thought, oh, that's an interesting. Why do you need
But let's flip the script. I think you actually told me this a long time ago when we were talking about race, which was helpful.
Yeah.
But I think it's helpful in gender, too. Let's flip the script and see if the statement is acceptable if we say it the other way. If it is, then it's a good logical statement, and it's okay.
Yeah. If
we don't like it, there might be a problem in the language. So let's flip it around. A man can do anything a woman can do.
Nope. I think that's pretty obvious. That was what I thought when I saw that thing. I'm
Wait
thinking,
a second.
I can't give birth.
There's just differences.
You can make
clearly.
you can alter whatever you want to medically if you've got tons of money. But at the end of the day, I think there are natural things that men can do that women can't do, that women can do that men can't do, and we should be totally fine with that because
the argument of this though is going into things like the workplace.
Sure.
And we're not saying that's not the case. We're saying great. If men and women want to do these jobs together, that's not what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Well, but all of these things, these are all just little kind of pop-up weeds, if you will, of something that is much, much deeper, and we're so super busy cutting the tops of these weeds off over and over and over again. And if you've got weeds in your yard, you can't just pull out the top and it's fine. They're coming back.
Root. Yep.
And so I've been trying to think, what is the root of this? What is the root of this? And right there in Romans 1:23, it says that as sinners, we've exchanged the glory of the immortal God, which again, I think the gender roles were created as a way to display the glory of the immortal God.
I agree.
And he said, we exchange them for images resembling mortal man, birds, animals, and creeping things. Now I'm going to take that super literally and say that there are creeping things on the planet that are gender neutral. There are reptiles and stuff that can literally switch their gender if they don't have an appropriate gender with them, and then they can breed.
I just learned that worms have both genders.
Yeah. So take it for what you will, and maybe I'm just out in left field, but I really think that that's at the heart of the issue. What humans have done in suppressing this truth about God and unrighteousness, we've exchanged the glory of the immortal God. We've exchanged male and female and the beauty that is male and female for what is right in my own eyes, and I can be either. I can switch.
Well, a lot of it is lack of submission. I can do whatever I want. Therefore, let's worship the human that can do whatever he or she wants. And we're celebrating this to an unbelievable degree.
Yeah.
We're celebrating our radical rebellion, which that's a little risky, according to the Bible, which was the question, right? What does the Bible say about this? The Bible says this is a really bad idea. This is a bad idea, to just continue to degrade the value of both men and women is what you're doing. You're removing what makes women uniquely women and men uniquely men.
Yeah.
For the sake of there's a line in The Incredibles that says, I think the boy and the mom, they're superheroes, but they're in hiding, and the mom says, everybody's special in their own unique way, and she turns and says, that means no one's special, or when everyone's special, no
one
one's
is.
special.
That's right.
I'm like, we're literally degrading the very uniqueness that God gave us by doing this.
Yeah.
Which is really sad. All right, we got a bunch of questions here. Should we
Yeah.
move on from that one? Because that is such a convoluted bit.
It is.
What you got? You want to add something?
Just last like a piece.
Yeah,
just
fire
want to say
away.
that I think it's great that we live here and we can talk about it, because unfortunately in Canada, so that they don't have free speech in Canada. You can't just say whatever you want. It's not a protected right. And to ask this question in Canada and to answer it the way that we have just answered it, if we were in Canada, it's quite possible that we'd be jailed for hate speech. Just in answering
so
the
we
question.
should probably throw this out, and you know my position on politics. I believe that the kingdom is much higher than the country.
Yeah.
Right? So I tend to try to focus on that. But it's interesting. I just read that there's a bill in California working its way through Congress that says any book that doesn't agree with that position would be considered hate speech, and then the books would be banned. So we have an entire group of people saying we want to ban any books that don't agree with our position on this thing. And I don't know all the nuances of that law.
Well,
But I've read
pastors are
something
terrified
about
in
it.
Canada right now because the Bible directly is that book, right?
Mhm.
So
yeah, well, in Canada it'd be way bad. And I have a couple friends I follow on Facebook on Canada, and I think, man, this has got to be tricky. It's got to be really tough.
It's been all over Facebook. There's people in California right now because they just implemented the new sex education course in California that you cannot opt your children out of. So there was the normal sex education that we're maybe used to or something that the kids go through when they're in like 5th or 6th grade. That's just a very kind of, skim the surface.
Well, it's physical. It's physical.
So now they've added a second part of this course in California that deals with transgender and homosexuality and all of this. And that one, the kids are not allowed to opt out. You're not allowed to opt your kids out of there. It's mandatory. They have to go to that.
The concerning thing we should have about this is, what do we do if we set a precedent that the state gets to dictate everything our children learn? Now, that might be fine today for some folks, but what happens when the tables turn and then the state gets to dictate the other side of that?
Yeah.
When the state gets to dictate everything we learn about religion, which people are opposed to, or everything we get to learn about, you name it, this is a dangerous game we're playing with.
Yeah.
When we're going to say the state gets to mandate what's more important than what God is doing, I mean, we are...
That's scary.
We are playing with fire, right? Oh, wait, I'll put the other one over there. So I want to see where we're at. How are we doing? Oh, man, we got
it. So speaking of the state, if you will.
Which one are we going to?
So Utah. Man. Utah is an LDS state.
I'm pretty sure this did not come as a question.
Well, maybe before we get to the next statement that we turned into a question, speak to that. Is Utah an LDS state?
No. First of all, we don't have that kind of mentality in any of our states. Okay, we could say there are many, many, many people that are LDS, but our state constitution, while maybe heavily influenced by LDS culture, we don't have an LDS state and a Baptist state and a agnostic state. However, we have a lot of people who live within these states that believe these ideals. Okay, so for Utah, if we took the whole state, Utah has a lot of LDS people. I don't think that's a secret.
No, not at all.
And most of the state, there are communities that have the only faith structure you find in that state, or in that city, in Utah, is an LDS thing. So statewide, yes, there are a lot of LDS people, and the state was founded by people who came here to Mexico when it was still Mexico and wanted to form their own nation, and it didn't really pan out really well, and they became a state. Okay, so in that regard, Utah is heavily influenced by LDS philosophy, theology, belief structure, and culture.
Yeah.
So I'd say, okay, fair enough. Salt Lake City, where I live, not every place is predominantly LDS. Salt Lake City there was just recently an article in the Salt Lake Tribune that said only 49% of the population in Salt Lake City proper is on the LDS rolls, and then they had an LDS expert say, and he said this is pretty common worldwide, that half the people on the rolls are not practicing or attending or engaged in the faith in that way. So that means...
That's a significant number of people.
Yeah, so in Salt Lake City, that's like 24% of the population would be practicing LDS, where I live in Salt Lake City, where you live in Salt Lake City. Yeah. So up front, to make a massive assumption...
Like what the population numbers are here? I can't remember.
I'd have to look them up, and on this live stream with the camera staring at me, I'm not going to...
We're good.
I can look at. We've done a lot of that research, and we do a lot of that. I'd be happy to share that with people, but we just, I don't want to misquote.
No, you're good.
So that's the first part. So just the assumption, says, hey, and the way the question's coming, it was like, this is my thing, you're not a part of it, you're an outsider, and you can see that in the next part of the question.
Okay, so Utah is an LDS state. That's what their premise is. If you don't like it, why don't you move?
Thank you for engaging on the text. I think we know probably what's coming there.
Mm-hmm.
We're Christians. We're evangelical Christians. We believe in the triune God. We do not believe that the LDS theology accurately reflects Jesus of the Bible, the gospel. There are some differences.
Yeah.
So we speak about that.
Yeah.
And we'll be at the Rose Park Festival. If you'd like to come talk to us in an hour and a half or so,
Yeah.
come talk to us. We'd be happy to chat with you about that. But we hold to that belief just like LDS missionaries hold that they believe that the Book of Mormon is another testament to the gospel and that there's a living prophet. They believe their theology.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Well, let me just drop this into two parts, because it's an if-then.
Yeah.
So if you don't like it, you've already agreed that Utah is not an LDS state, so it's not, you can't say that, well, I don't like that, because it's not an LDS state. It's just a state where there tends to be a lot of LDS people, but that number is what seems to be shrinking. But if it was an LDS state, would you agree with the statement that, do you like that?
Even if it's not an LDS state, I don't like that there are not people submitted to the gospel of Jesus Christ and his word and his presentation of who he's... That's why I'm here.
Got it.
Because God has said, hey, there is a lost world. His Great Commission says, go into the world, make disciples of all the nations. And so I look and go, wow, there's a bunch of people who are not disciples. Disciples are those who hear from the Lord and follow him. I don't know if they're hearing from the Jesus of the Bible.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're following. And the same is true of those who are not LDS. And there are many of them here. And the same is even true of people who sit in Christian churches who are not hearing from the Lord, not following him. So I don't like any of that. If I'm going to do my job as an ambassador of Jesus Christ, I'm going to go where people are not following Jesus. I'm going to herald the word to the best of my ability, do what we're doing here, talk about it, discuss it, with the hope that God would do something with that, and he would change the condition of the hearts of those people, because the Bible also speaks of where those people end up and what their life looks like, and I don't like it. That's awful.
Yeah.
And I would say the same is true of LDS missionaries who send people around the world that want to do that. So, to your question, do you like it? No, I don't like it. I don't think God likes it, right?
Like, yeah, exactly. I think it's the exact same thing. Like, if you had an activity that you really like to do, or a restaurant that you really liked, or a movie that you really liked, and then somebody said, oh, well, this is a state, that primarily hasn't seen that film, or we don't go to that restaurant. Why don't you move? Like, wait a minute, no, what I don't like is that you haven't experienced the joys of what I just got to experience. I want you to be able to do it, too.
I want you to do it, yeah.
And that's what I don't like, but the question seems to try to imply or impose onto us that we don't like LDS people. That's crazy.
That's ridiculous. I have LDS family.
Yeah.
In fact, my nephew just got his mission call to go somewhere, and they posted on Facebook like, we're not going to open it until everybody's here on Sunday. We're going to see, where is he going on a mission? He's LDS. I love my family. I love them. I love Jesus. I would love my family to love the Jesus of the Bible. And this is very personal. It's very hard. I love them. I wouldn't be here if I didn't like LDS people.
Yeah.
That would be ridiculous.
So it's probably actually the opposite of the question. That Utah is an LDS state. If you don't like it, why don't you move? It's like, well, I do like them. That's why I'm not.
That's why I'm here. Because God calls us to love our neighbors. They're my neighbors.
Yeah.
Not just LDS, all the people here in the state. That's why we're here as missionaries. That's why I don't leave. Plus, let's just... So my nephew's going to go somewhere. He's going to go to a place where there's not a lot of LDS. I don't know. He could go anywhere in the world. But let's say he goes to a place that doesn't have very many Mormons. Mm-hmm. That logic says he shouldn't. He shouldn't seek to change that place as a Mormon missionary. Yeah. But the compassion that compels him to go on an LDS mission is the same or similar compassion that compels me. Yeah. I firmly believe that this book, the Word of God, that Jesus Christ, that us glorifying God, us finding salvation in Christ alone is the most important thing I could be doing. Yeah. They have the same similar type convictions in their book, in their mission, in what they're doing, in their culture. So it's not a very fair question.
No, it's not, and I think the question itself
it's not a very fair statement. It didn't
no,
come
it's not
as
really
a question.
But it's internally inconsistent too, because it assumes that that we shouldn't be trying to maybe change the hearts and minds of people by sharing the gospel or sharing what we believe with LDS people in hopes that they would come to know the God of the Bible. Mm-hmm. by saying like, well, if you don't like it, why don't you just get out of here? Meaning like, we're not like you. You're not allowed to try to get us to.
You don't get to have a voice.
Yeah, but then it turns right around and defeats itself by saying, so leave. Like, well, wait a minute, you're going to tell me what I should do. I'm not allowed to express my like hopes and for you. What I hope you will do.
I think it's just something that's spoken out of frustration.
Probably a little bit. We love you. If you're LDS, we really love you. We really do. We want
Come
to know
talk
the
with
God
us.
of the Bible.
Come talk to us at the Rose Park Festival.
Yeah.
Like that, we're going to
Sure.
be there. Come chat with us all day.
Yeah.
Today. I mean, if you're watching this and it's recorded later, we might not be there. But we have 15 minutes.
All right. What can or should churches do about to attract a younger
I think it's your
generation?
turn. Hold on. I think it's your turn.
Whoa.
Hey, Derek.
Oh.
What can or should the churches do to attract a younger generation that doesn't care about church anymore?
Preach the gospel.
No.
Let's see. What can or should we do? So there's a few reasons why I think that we're not attracting the younger generation, and it's multi-generational. I think it's been coming. I don't think it's something that we just started doing. I think it's been happening for a while, and we're seeing some of the bad fruit of it.
You raise a good point. This is the same question people were asking in the 60s, the same question people were asking in the 40s, same question people were asking in the 20s,
Right.
same question people were asking in the zeros, same question people... I'm going to
The
the...
zero.
I'm like, wait, the aughts, the zeros,
Something.
the 80s, the
Yeah.
1880s,
Yeah.
like, this is not a new thing.
Well, we've and I'm too young to know whether or not the statement is true, but I'm going to try. It seems like, at least in the last few decades, we've tried to do something where we mimic and mirror culture around us to try to be relevant, cool, hip, whatever the word was throughout the decades.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, so we wanted to do that. The problem is that when you're trying to follow cultural streams and trends like that, you're always on the tail end of it. By the time it's
That's a good
popular and the church gets a hold of it, culture's already moved on to the next thing. So we're always like 10 years behind. And
Yeah.
if you've walked into any church building, you can almost see it like, wow, this was 10 years ago. Like it's very obvious. And sometimes further back. Sometimes it's, oh, this was 50 years ago.
Well, they were at one point 10 years ago, and they still...
Yeah.
What you're saying is encapsulated in most of these books right behind you here.
Yeah.
They're all trying to go, how do you get in touch with culture?
Yeah.
And the book comes out 2, 3, 4, 5 years later than the trend actually catching people's attention.
Yeah. And it's like, so we're always on the tail end of it instead of being, so I always, like the illustration in my mind was always kind of like a river that's, flowing. Culture is always flowing. It's always moving. And we're constantly trying to swim maybe upstream to get to wherever this cool, new, hip, just breaking through thing is, instead of being kind of a rock or like an island in the middle of this flowing water that's constant and is the same all the time, that in the midst of an ever-changing culture. I don't remember who it was.
Now, are you saying, like, we can't change music choices, we
No.
can't change paint colors? What are you saying?
Not at all. So
give us
I think
a descriptor.
I don't remember who it was that said it, but they said that at the very top you have kind of faith or religion, if you will, like your core beliefs and values, and then out of that flows culture, and then out of culture flows politics and this and that, and everything comes out of that. But right at the very top of it is core values that we as Christians would say that this is where we get our faith. This is the Bible. This is the God of Scriptures.
It's a transcendent
a
thing.
transcendent argument. And we have tried to kind of almost like put church further down the thing where we're like trying to work our way up into culture and be cool and be relevant instead of letting the church create the culture. And
it's interesting. It's like, so we put it over here. Now what are we actually trying to reach transcendently?
Well, that's
That's
the worship
creepy.
of
Like,
culture.
it's
That's
culture.
Romans 1 again, where we've exchanged the glory of God for the things of the world.
Now culture is more important than the kingdom.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, wait, hold on. Wait a second. We're trying to use culture as a vehicle to proclaim the kingdom. My challenge to that is like, are you? How's that going? Because sometimes that's true, but most of the time, we just don't want to be seen as not part of culture. Or we don't want to be seen as old or outdated. Or we don't want, it's really a reaction out of something rather than we're trying to. So when people tell me that, I usually go, let me see how that's actually working.
Well, a lot of
Let me see what that looks like.
The church planning networks have kind of jumped back onto this truth that the culture starts in a city, and then it flows out from the city. You get suburbs that, similar to the way the church was kind of always 10 years behind, suburbs are always a little bit behind of what's happening in the interior of a city, because culture flows out from the city.
Right.
And-
Until social media changes all culture.
Yeah,
Let's
that's
see what
kind of-
happens
that's
in a
changing
decade.
everything.
Everybody now has an electronic
But
presence.
rewind the tape back, several hundred years, and churches, like whole towns and cities, were built around the cathedral or around the church. The church was at the center of the city.
That's still Utah culture. That's still Utah cities.
You're right.
Which
is
why
we have a very interesting culture here.
Center of the city.
So,
in fact, in my neighborhood, there's like walkways that cut right through all the neighborhoods to get to the steakhouse.
Right.
So the steakhouse is not where you go eat good fine beef.
No, a different steakhouse. So here we are in the suburbs, trying to influence upstream, and I just don't think that's going to work.
I think part of our challenge in the metaphor is we then think, oh well, let's just go to the heart of the city. What we need to do is go to the heart of the concept of what's creating culture.
Yeah, So, and this has a lot of different implications. The late Dr. Sproul said that we, as Americans, we've flipped something backwards. We pick our church based on where we live, and he said we should be picking where we live based on where we go to church. So you can recreate what they had 100+ years ago of a parish model church that you knew the people in your community, which the LDS people are doing a great job of that. That's been their model, and it's been really successful for them. Why the Christian church has abandoned that is
well, that's part of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, we're trying
to live outside of the parish, the community we're in, the west side, Salt Lake, North Salt Lake, this whole west side of the freeway down to 2100. If you're outside of that, it's fine, come join us, but really, it's nice to be able to walk to your house.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to have people in different communities that are close together and saying, hey, the community where we live that's why we're going to the Rose Park Festival.
Yeah. Well, so we've hacked around the question. I don't think we've actually answered the question. So what should the church do to attract the younger generation that doesn't care about church anymore? Well, there's a bunch of things I think we should stop doing. Like, let's stop trying to swim upstream and catch up to whatever culture is, and let's start creating culture by means of like what does biblical culture look like, and just living that out. And part of that is putting into play that parish model idea where community means a lot, being rooted in Scripture. Like when people show up at there's been so many different little polls and opinions and stuff, like articles were written getting opinions of young people, and they say, oh yeah, I went to a church and all the sermon was on was just kind of the latest political thing, or it was about this, or it was about this little trend, and he was preaching against this that we saw on the news, or whatever. And none of it was all just kind of that surface stuff. None of it dealt with real deep heart-rooted issues.
Right.
What does the Bible actually say to these
But check this out. We're surveying people, and they're giving an answer that might be the socially acceptable answer or this heart answer.
Yep.
The question is, how do they really operate?
Yep.
Right. There is a problem with the survey. If you say, okay, now we're going to preach the word, and this means you need to stop having sex with your girlfriend, I'm out of here. I'm out of here, and they're gone. So, on some levels, I don't think we should be swayed as much by surveys as we should be by the word.
No, not
so I want to read something, and then
because the answer is twofold, and I think what you're going to get at is the deeper part of this. That,
what can we do and what should we do are two separate things.
Yeah.
And you're talking about we could do this, we could do that, and we should do. Some of these things you're not wrong. Right. I'm just thinking we need to get the surveys to be secondary.
Yeah. How
does a survey speak to the Word of God?
Well, the problem is, even if we do some of these things that we can and should do, I don't necessarily think it's going to attract the younger people. I'm just saying I think the church has gotten off some things that we should be doing that we need to. However, if we reinstitute these things, I still don't think it's going to attract the younger generation.
I think the question almost is wrong. If we're this rock and we're letting God move people and we're there, then they'll come or they won't. But to say we want to be completely attractional to what they're doing means we want to appease what they want.
Well, the premise is wrong.
And go talk to some people and say, would you like to appease what the millennial or what the next generation below the millennial coming up or what the senior citizen wants, only that? Will that be what answers the question? A lot of times you go, well, no, they don't really want what they don't want. They're driven by flesh and sin and whatever, and we need to be doing something. So Paul says something about this. 2 Timothy 4, the key verse in this is 3, but I'm just going to read from the beginning. Paul is talking to Timothy, encouraging him what to do in the church where he's pastoring in the first century, right? So this is not a new problem. I charge you in the presence of God and of Christ Jesus, who is the judge of the living and the dead, and by his appearing and his kingdom. Preach the word. Be ready in season and out of season. Reprove, rebuke, and exhort with complete patience and teaching. Verse 3. For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but have itching ears, They will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander off into myths. As for you, always be sober-minded, endure suffering, and do the work of the evangelist, fulfill your ministry. I think the premise is like, you could appease them and attract them, but preach the word and let it do the work.
Yeah.
We've got 5 minutes.
Man.
I know this goes fast.
Ran out.
Hey, by the way, while I was looking at the question, we get these questions by people texting in to 385-368-36665. And so if you want to engage in that, please feel free to text us questions, and we'll try to deal with them next week if this has been helpful and good, or post the comments on the Facebook Live stream if you're watching that avenue. We've got kind of 2 things going. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Subscribe to our channel. If you're watching on the Facebook Live stream, then like our church and be a part of what we're doing, so you can keep up. We do these about every couple of weeks, but we might do them more often or less often as time permits, or what we're doing. What we got here?
All right. So we'll probably end with this. We probably won't get to the last one, so we might want to save that for next week.
Okay. Okay. Hey, so this is the question I'm going to save for next week, so you don't feel like you got jaded or slided or whatever the word jaded would be wrong. You'll be jaded if I slide you.
Probably.
You don't. There's no tithing in the New Testament, so why do churches always want your money? That's the question. We're going to deal with that next live, and I'll keep it over here in the stack, and we'll go there. So, all right, I'll put that right there. We'll save that.
All right. So the question is, when are Christians going to take up the social justice of school shooting and do something? That was how it was worded. So,
when are Christians going to take up the social justice of school shooting or shootings, or this problem with people shooting each other, I would assume, and do something? I think there's a heart of something going on here, and that is obviously yesterday we had another school shooting. These things seem to be a normal part of our reality now. It seems like no school is exempt. It seems like there's something going on. I read a couple articles about this on how now young people, there's no rhyme or reason, it seems like, between different people doing these things, and the goal is just to inflict as many casualties as possible so that it makes the news, because if you don't have enough casualties, people won't take notice of you. Very disturbing problem. Very disturbing. I don't know if you want to jump in and say something.
Well, so you had a text in mind for James 4. I'm just going to read it, and then I'm going to just say one thing that I thought was incredibly, I don't want to say interesting, because it's a sensitive subject, because we want to be sensitive to the people that were impacted.
By the way, first of all, this is a serious issue, and I've spent some time praying, and my heart really goes out. These folks have been praying that God would bring comfort and peace. I have a friend who was a first responder in the church shooting in Texas, nearby to this area, where they're trying to do that in Sutherland Springs. I mean, this is painful.
It really is. I mean, everybody wants to immediately jump to social justice or a political thing with this.
Do something about it.
Yeah, the fact
is, let's comfort people.
Yeah, people died. So we want to let's love on people, and let's see what does the Bible
pray for
say?
them,
so
pray for their families, and pray for. What do you got?
The text that you had was James 4, and it dealt with warnings against worldliness and why things.
Sure, that's clear, but I think there's still a root issue here. This is the first thing I jotted when I got this question yesterday.
It says, "What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you?" That's the question that's posed. Enmity with God. Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God.
So I just want to share why this came to mind. If this is the problem Christians have as they're doing wars, Jesus is sanctifying them, bringing them into his likeness, is we're still battling with the sin nature of our soul. Why would we not expect that to be even more so with those who don't have Jesus? I mean, making us sanctificationists. This is the depravity of our soul. That our passions are driving us. And so I thought about this. I'll let you get to this.
It says you desire and you don't have, so you murder.
So you murder. We really, that's just hyperbole. But here's the deal. I look at this and I go, okay, we have people that don't know how to follow the unity of the Bible in Ephesians. The book of Ephesians talks a lot about how we get along. I mean, we have slaves or landowners and their bondservants sitting together in church, and there's a discussion about unity. Husbands and wives, parents and children, people in the church. We have discussions in the letters in 1st and 2nd Corinthians about unity and coming into unity. Not just for the sake of let's just throw everything out and be unified, but how do we actually get along? And there's a discussion about what that looks like. Submitting to one another in love and reverence. And what we've done is we have a culture where if I'm central to everyone else's universe in my thinking, and you're central to everyone else's universe, and my passions are this, and your passions are that, and we're not learning, which we see evidence in. We cannot have conflicting ideas on church campuses.
Right.
I mean, church campuses. I hope we can have conflicting ideas and unity on
Yeah.
church campuses. On college campuses, so we have to have this is a no conflict zone, no conflicting ideas. We have no free speech in Canada, like we talked about in that way. We have bills passing in California that say, hey, we don't want any conflicting ideas. We don't want to have a sense of unity and diversity. And then we're not socializing kids well in public schools, in their church settings, because they're only learning this way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have a diversity of ideas in one area, but we don't allow diversity of ideas in other areas, which communicates still. Whoever has the power calls the shots.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, your passions sort of go, I want to have the power, I want to have this. So we should not be surprised when something goes south and a person goes, I'm going to go and shoot up the place.
Yeah.
That's awful to say.
Well, what was interesting about
Awful
just the
to
text,
say.
where he says you fight and you quarrel, you desire and you don't have to, you murder, you covet and can't obtain, so you fight and quarrel. In the aftermath of the shooting yesterday, when they finally got the shooter, and they had some time to question him or something, basically his one response to why did you do this, when he got his initial court appearance, when they asked him if he wanted a lawyer and everything, he said, I targeted people I didn't like. That was his response. I just targeted people I don't like.
There's really this root identity issue in all of this.
Yeah.
You don't think like me. I don't have any kind of sense of unity and understanding how community works anymore.
Yeah.
We don't have community.
There's no community.
There's no community. There's nobody submitting to the Lord. For the sake of time, I'll say this because we're really out of time, I think. Because you and I were talking a little bit about this. We were like, what do we do with this question? Christians should pray their faces off.
Yeah.
Christians should proclaim the truth of the gospel, because the world not submitted to the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, is this world. Mm-hmm. God suspends this kind of stuff, and his people are light, but if we're going to reject him, we have to be willing to accept the ramifications of the world of our creation. Yeah. The world of our creation is violent, self-centered, it's full of sin. I don't know how, we're okay with that. I'm not. I'm compelled. God has shown me, there's a better way to do this. I'm compelled to say, let's be people of peace. And I've watched my lifetime now, 40 plus, 42 years, I've been watching, and I'm not seeing the people that say, hey, we get utopia when we throw out God. I'm not seeing that happen. In fact, from my perspective, it does not seem like we're even close. Mm-hmm. So I'm not buying that. I can't buy it. That's just something I can't take in. I see God transcendent of all of this, proclaiming what is right and what is good. And so as Christians, I think it's our job to proclaim that. I mean, we just read in the letter from Paul to Timothy, preach the gospel. Proclaim this in Acts, 18, I think. 18 verse 19. Don't be afraid. Continue speaking the gospel. There's many people in this city where God's telling Paul, there's many people that I have there that need the gospel. Go and proclaim his word. So for the sake of time, I'll say, as Christians, our first goal should not be put our hope and trust in our political system to fix this problem. Mm-hmm. Not saying we are a part of that, and we can proclaim into that, but that should not be our primary hope. Our primary hope has to be rooted in the Lord. Yeah. Hands down. Our primary job should be twofold: praying and asking God to intercede, and proclaiming the gospel, because the gospel is what changes this.
You said something earlier that was, before we started, it was profound. You can't legislate sin.
No. We have laws.
Yeah, we have laws. He broke the laws.
He broke laws.
Doing what he did. So
our government's not powerful enough to combat sin.
Yeah.
And that is obvious. And so, hey, we had prohibition at one point. We're going to stop all alcohol consumption. That didn't go so well.
No, it didn't.
Couldn't stop that. Now, I'm not saying alcohol consumption is sin. I'm just saying the government didn't even have the power to stop that. The government doesn't have the power to stop lots of sin. Mm-hmm. Sin still runs rampant. We don't like it. So adding more laws on paper that we think the government is going to stop. We have laws you can't text and drive. You know how many people I see staring at their phone driving in our state? Mm-hmm. Well, let's make the penalties bigger. Light penalties. I'm the God of my own universe. I can do whatever I want. I don't have to submit to anything or anybody. Yeah. We can't legislate this. Yeah. And that, I think, is our challenge. Yeah. You have something you want to add? We're really running down on time here. We're over time. We got to get to the Rose Park Festival.
I think that's good. That's good. If we didn't answer that question, enough, text in, and if you got a clarifying or a follow-up question, just
We could probably make an entire
Yeah, we could
series
probably do a
about
whole bit on
shootings, and because it's not just school shootings, it's church shootings and the shooting of YouTube, and then there's even ones that you don't even see that are broadcast that much, and quarreling, murdering.
Well, this was close to home just this last week. Like, there was a kid that brought a gun to West High, right up the street.
Well, and
I mean,
this
he
goes
was
another
caught,
direction.
but-
This goes another direction. I'm going to take action, either hurting someone else, hurting myself, doing what. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's crazy.
Yeah.
The world needs the gospel. The world
That's
needs
right.
Jesus. Hey, we are out of time. The number, if you want to engage, and we love your questions. It's very helpful. 385-368-6665. We're going to try to have maybe a third person here to get some other, just some back and forth conversation. Those questions are good. We appreciate you tuning in. You can always leave additional questions we'll follow up on in the comments of wherever you're watching this. So thank you very much. We'll probably do this again in a couple weeks.
Yep.
And we'll see you then.